The gas lamps flickered in the Shanghai Municipal Asylum on the night of March 17, 1889, casting shadows that danced across walls stained with God knows what. A British orderly named Thomas Wexford would later testify that he heard singing coming from cell 7, a woman's voice, clear and impossibly beautiful, reciting something in Mandarin that made his skin crawl, not because it sounded demonic, but because it sounded like medicine. Like the very formulas his physician employers had been publishing under their own names for the past 3 years. When he opened the viewing slot, he saw her. Blind eyes turned toward nothing, fingers tracing invisible characters in the air, lips moving through what he would later learn were acupuncture meridian points being mapped from memory. Lin Mei was dying, had been dying for weeks, but she wasn't praying. She was teaching, speaking to walls, preserving knowledge that powerful men had already decided must die with her. The orderly did something that would cost him his career. He started writing down everything she said. What Thomas Wexford documented that night would not surface for another 43 years. When it did, it would prove that one of the greatest medical frauds in colonial history had been perpetrated not by ignorance, but by deliberate, calculated theft. That a blind Chinese woman with no formal education had possessed knowledge that would revolutionize treatments for tuberculosis, cholera, and sepsis decades before Western medicine claimed those discoveries. And that the men who stole her formulas didn't just erase her name from history. They had her declared legally insane, locked away, and left to rot because a peasant girl knowing more than Cambridge-educated physicians was a threat to the entire colonial order. This is the story they buried, but the grave wasn't deep enough. Lin Mei was born in 1866 in a village outside Suzhou, so small it doesn't appear on colonial maps. Her father grew rice. Her mother died in childbirth when Lin Mei was 2. What made her childhood unusual wasn't poverty. That was universal. But her Grandmother Lin had been a traveling healer in her youth, one of the wandering medical practitioners who moved between villages offering treatments the imperial physicians in Beijing would never deign to provide. By the time Lin Mei came into her care, the grandmother's hands shook too badly to insert acupuncture needles, her eyes too clouded to identify herbs properly. But her mind remained sharp as broken glass. The smallpox came when Lin Mei was 4 years old. It swept through their village like fire through paper, killing 7 children in 3 weeks. Lin Mei survived, but the fever that accompanied it burned something essential behind her eyes. When the scabs fell away, she could no longer see light, could not distinguish her father's face from darkness. The village herbalist told them she would likely die anyway. Blind children rarely survived past 10 in rural China. Grandmother Lin responded by beginning Lin Mei's education. Every night by candlelight the child could not see, the old woman would recite, not stories, not poems, medical formulas. For fever with red tongue and rapid pulse, Jin Yin Hua 15 grams, Lion Kaio 12 grams, boil in 3 cups water until reduced to 1. Lin Mei would repeat it back, again and again, until the formula lived in her bones. The grandmother's reasoning was simple and devastating. A blind girl could not pick herbs, could not see patients, could not earn her keep through normal medical practice. But if she could memorize, truly memorize with perfect recall, then she might survive by becoming a living medical text. What Grandmother Lin could not have predicted was that her granddaughter's mind worked differently than other children's. The child did not just memorize formulas. She understood them. By age 7, she could hear a formula once and not only recite it perfectly, but explain the diagnostic reasoning behind each ingredient, suggest modifications for different patient constitutions, and identify which herbs could substitute if others were unavailable. By age 9, she had memorized every formula her grandmother knew, more than 3,000 of them, and was requesting more. Grandmother Lin began trading with other healers, bartering rice and labor in exchange for them sharing their knowledge with her granddaughter. The blind girl would sit perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, as elderly practitioners recited formulas they had spent lifetimes collecting. Lin Mei never took notes, never needed to. When they finished, she would recite everything back, word perfect, often catching errors in their own recitation. "You said dang gooey 8 grams, but it should be 12 for blood deficiency," she would correct, her child's voice clinically precise. The healers were unsettled. Some called it a gift from the gods, others suspected something darker. By age 12, Lin Mei had memorized 6,847 formulas, but memorization alone wouldn't save her. Grandmother Lin began bringing patients to their home, letting her granddaughter listen to their symptoms, feel their pulses, examine their tongues by touch. The old woman would announce the diagnosis, but Lin Mei would whisper corrections. "The pulse is not flooding, it's thin and rapid. Not kidney yang deficiency, kidney yin deficiency with empty heat." And she was right. Almost always right. The patients began asking specifically for the blind girl's opinion, started paying extra for it. Then in 1880, Grandmother Lin died. Suddenly. Completely. One morning she did not wake. Lin Mei, 14 years old and blind, was alone with a father who resented her education. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The patients kept coming. Word had spread through the network of rural healers about the blind girl who knew more formulas than any living practitioner. They came testing her at first, presenting with symptoms they had already diagnosed to see if she would reach the same conclusion. She did. Then she would suggest modifications to the standard treatment protocols. The healers would return weeks later, astonished. The modifications worked better than the classical formulas. Lin Mei began to develop a reputation that transcended the usual bounds of rural medicine. She wasn't just a memorization machine. She was innovating, connecting patterns across thousands of formulas that no one had connected before, creating new combinations that should not have worked according to traditional theory but did. By 1885, at 19 years old, she was treating between 30 and 50 patients per week, with other healers traveling days to consult her on difficult cases. Her father, who had once wanted to marry her off, now guarded her jealously. She was earning more than his rice fields ever had. This could not stand, not in a world where Western medicine was aggressively colonizing China, where British and American doctors were establishing hospitals in every major city, where traditional Chinese medicine was being systematically dismissed as superstition. The collision was inevitable. It came in the form of Dr. Edmund Wickham. Dr. Wickham arrived in Shanghai in 1886 as part of the London Missionary Society's medical mission. Cambridge-educated, 34 years old, supremely confident in the superiority of Western scientific method over what he called Oriental mysticism. He established a practice in the international settlement that catered primarily to wealthy Western expatriates but also accepted Chinese patients as charity work. His success rate was mediocre. Cholera patients died. Tuberculosis patients wasted. Infections that Chinese herbalists routinely treated successfully baffled him. More humiliating was that his Chinese patients kept leaving to see traditional healers, and some of them got better. In early 1887, Dr. Wickham began hearing rumors about a blind woman in the countryside who was performing medical miracles. He dismissed them as typical native superstition until one of his own patients, a British merchant's Chinese wife, returned after he had given up on her chronic digestive condition. She was cured, completely. She told him about the blind healer who had prescribed a complex herbal formula recited from memory, including precise dosages and preparation instructions. Dr. Wickham was intrigued despite himself, not because he believed in Chinese medicine, but because underneath the colonial arrogance he was a scientist, and a mystery was a mystery. He made the journey to Lin Mei's village in March of 1887, bringing with him 2 other British physicians and a translator. They arrived unannounced, demanding to see the witch doctor everyone spoke of. Lin Mei's father was terrified, but Lin Mei agreed to meet them. The The confrontation occurred in her small receiving room, which smelled of dried herbs and incense. Dr. Wickham would later write about this meeting in his private journal, a document that would not be discovered until 1932 in an Oxford archive. According to Wickham's account, he began by testing her. He described a patient's symptoms in English, which the translator converted to Mandarin. A 40-year-old man with persistent fever, night sweats, cough-producing blood-tinged sputum, weight loss over 3 months. Lin Mei listened silently, her blind eyes fixed on nothing. Then she asked questions. What did the tongue look like? What was the quality of the pulse? What was the color of the man's urine? Wickham, surprised by the precision of her questions, provided answers. Lin Mei thought for perhaps 30 seconds. Then she recited a formula: 14 herbs, specific dosages, preparation method, dietary restrictions to accompany the treatment. Treatment duration of 6 weeks with modifications at 3-week mark based on symptom changes. Wickham wrote in his journal, "I was prepared to dismiss this as peasant guesswork, but when I returned to Shanghai and researched her formula, I discovered something disturbing. Every ingredient she specified has documented anti-tubercular properties according to recent German pharmaceutical research. Some of these compounds we have only recently isolated in laboratory settings. She could not possibly know this. She cannot read German medical journals. She cannot read at all in any Western language. Yet she prescribed what amounts to a sophisticated multi-drug treatment protocol for tuberculosis that rivals anything being done in London or Berlin." He went back, again and again, bringing more cases, more complex cases, patients Western medicine had given up on, and Lin Mei, sitting in her simple room, would listen and prescribe an herbal formula for cholera that reduced mortality rates from 60% to 20%, a combination of acupuncture points and herbs for sepsis that worked faster than anything in Wickham's medical bag, a treatment for childhood epilepsy that reduced seizure frequency by 70%. Wickham was documenting everything, every formula, every technique, every diagnostic method. Lin Mei, trusting that these foreign doctors wanted to learn, wanting to help patients regardless of who treated them, shared freely. She even explained her reasoning. The formulas were not arbitrary, she told them through the translator. Traditional Chinese medicine was based on pattern recognition, identifying the underlying imbalance in the body's systems and correcting it. Western medicine treated symptoms. Chinese medicine treated patterns. This herb clears heat and eliminates toxins. This one tonifies qi and strengthens the spleen. This combination creates a synergistic effect where the whole is greater than the sum of parts. Then came the decision that would define everything that followed. In June of 1887, Dr. Wickham published a paper in the British Medical Journal titled "Novel Treatment Protocols for Epidemic Cholera Observed in Chinese Practice." The paper described the herbal formula Lin Mei had given him, analyzed its chemical components, and presented clinical data from patients he had treated using her method. The paper was well received. Wickham's reputation grew. Medical schools requested more information, and Lin Mei's name appeared nowhere in the publication, not as a consultant, not as a source, not even as a footnote. When asked later why he had excluded her, Wickham's response was documented in a letter to a colleague. To credit a blind Chinese peasant woman would have undermined the credibility of the research. The medical establishment would have dismissed the work as native superstition rather than evaluating it on its scientific merits. I did what was necessary to ensure these treatments reached patients who need them. This was the logic of empire, the belief that theft could be justified as translation, that erasing indigenous knowledge holders from their own discoveries somehow made the knowledge more legitimate, more real. Wickham published 2 more papers over the next 18 months, each detailing treatments he had learned from Lin Mei, each crediting himself and observations of local practices, while never naming her. But Lin Mei did not know this yet. She continued to see patients, continued to share knowledge with the foreign doctors when they visited, believing she was contributing to a greater good. She thought they were colleagues. They thought she was a resource to be extracted. The turning point came in late 1888. By this time, Lin Mei's reputation had grown to the point where Chinese patients in Shanghai were asking foreign doctors if they knew about her treatments. Wealthy Chinese families began traveling to her village specifically to consult her. This created a problem. Lin Mei was supposed to be invisible. She was supposed to be a curiosity the foreign doctors studied in private, not a competing practitioner whose existence threatened their monopoly on medical authority. The colonial medical establishment in Shanghai faced a choice: acknowledge her expertise and risk validating traditional Chinese medicine as a peer system, or eliminate the threat. They chose elimination. In November 1888, Dr. Wickham filed a report with the Shanghai Municipal Council describing a concerning case of religious mania and possible demonic possession he had observed in a rural practitioner. The report described Lin Mei's ability to recite thousands of formulas as impossible for a normal human mind, and therefore indicative of supernatural influence or severe mental disturbance. It noted that she claimed to diagnose patients by feeling pulses, which rational medical science has proven to be a charlatan's trick. It expressed concern that she was leading vulnerable Chinese patients away from modern medical treatment and toward dangerous superstitious practices. The report recommended that Lin Mei be placed under medical observation for her own safety and the safety of her patients. The language was clinical. The intent was annihilation. Under colonial law, the Shanghai Municipal Council had authority to detain and commit Chinese subjects deemed a threat to public health or safety. No trial was required. No defense permitted. On the morning of January 8, 1889, British municipal police arrived at Lin Mei's home with a commitment order. Her father tried to stop them. He was restrained. Lin Mei, who had been in the middle of treating a patient, was informed she was being taken into protective custody for medical evaluation. She asked why. They told her it was for her own good. If hearing this makes your blood boil, then hit the like button and write in the comments. Say her name. Because for 136 years, the medical establishment tried to make sure you never would. Because they wanted her formulas but not her voice. Her knowledge but not her humanity. Because a system that steals from those it claims to help is not medicine, it's colonialism with a stethoscope. The Shanghai Municipal Asylum was not a hospital. It was a warehouse for problems the colonial administration wanted hidden. Opium addicts whose families had money to institutionalize them. Chinese women accused of prostitution. Political dissidents declared insane. The conditions were documented in multiple reports that the British authorities systematically ignored: overcrowding, minimal food, no actual medical treatment, violence from guards that went unpunished. Patients were not cured. They were stored. Lin Mei was placed in a cell with 3 other women, given a thin blanket and a bowl of rice congee twice daily, and told she would be evaluated when the doctors had time. The evaluation never came, because this was never about evaluation. Lin Mei spent the first weeks demanding to know the charges against her, demanding to see a lawyer, demanding to speak with the doctors who had visited her. Her demands were noted as continued evidence of paranoid delusions and inability to accept her condition. The asylum records show that she was never actually examined by a psychiatrist. No formal diagnosis was made. No treatment plan existed. She was simply there, disappeared. Dr. Wickham visited once, 3 weeks after her commitment. Thomas Wexford, the orderly, was present for this visit and documented it in a personal letter that survived in his family's papers. According to Wexford, Wickham stood outside Lin Mei's cell and spoke to her through the translator. "You have been spreading dangerous medical misinformation. You need treatment for your condition. If you confess that your abilities were fraudulent tricks designed to deceive patients, your case will be reviewed." Lin Mei's response translated back: "Everything I told you was true. Every formula works. You published my work under your name. You know it works because you have seen patients recover. This is not about medicine. This is about power. Wickham's response: power is precisely what you lack. The power of institutional authority, the power of scientific credentials, the power of being taken seriously by those who matter. You could have been grateful that I helped your folk remedies reach a wider audience. Instead, you persist in this delusion that you are my equal. You are not. You will never be. And the sooner you accept this, the sooner you can be helped. He never visited again. Lin Mei's condition in the asylum deteriorated through early 1889. The sparse diet weakened her immune system. The damp cell exacerbated respiratory problems. By March, she was coughing blood, the unmistakable sign of tuberculosis, the disease whose treatment she had taught Wickham. The asylum doctors noted her illness but provided no treatment. She was a charity case. A Chinese woman with no family able to advocate for her. Why waste resources? This is when Thomas Wexford began documenting her final teachings. He was not supposed to do this. Orderlies were forbidden from fraternizing with patients beyond basic custodial duties. But Wexford had been raised by a grandmother who practiced herbal healing in rural Wales. He recognized what he was hearing as real medical knowledge. He started bringing paper and pencil to the night shift, writing down everything Lin Mei recited through her cell door. She knew she was dying. Knew her knowledge would die with her if someone did not preserve it, so she taught. Formula after formula after formula, packing herself so Wexford's hand could keep up, organizing the formulas by category: respiratory diseases, digestive disorders, gynecological conditions, pediatric treatments, infectious diseases. Wexford documented that she remained lucid until the final week, though her voice weakened to a whisper. She taught him diagnostic techniques, pulse positions, tongue diagnosis markers. She explained the underlying theory of qi, blood, yin, yang, not as mysticism, but as a systematic framework for understanding physiological processes. On the night of March 17, 1889, knowing death was close, she did something extraordinary. She recited a complete treatment protocol for tuberculosis that combined traditional Chinese formulas with modifications based on what she had learned from Wickham about Western medical theory. She was, even in dying, trying to bridge the two systems, trying to create something better than either tradition alone. She died 3 days later, March 20, 1889, age 23. The official cause of death recorded in asylum records: pulmonary disease complicated by mental instability. No autopsy was performed. Her body was released to her father, who burned it according to Chinese custom. Her ashes were scattered in a river near her village. No memorial was erected. No obituary published. The British medical establishment that had exploited her knowledge never acknowledged her death. Dr. Edmund Wickham went on to publish 4 more papers based on treatments he had learned from her, receiving commendations from the Royal College of Physicians. He never mentioned her name again. Stop, pause, take time to think. If your world has just been shaken a little, hit like and show that you're moving toward the truth. Comment, they stole from her, if you understand that this was not about one woman or one doctor, but about a system that still operates today. Because while Lin Mei died in 1889, her story is not ancient history. It is the blueprint for how modern medical research still appropriates indigenous knowledge without compensation or credit. Thomas Wexford kept his notes hidden for 43 years. He left Shanghai in 1890, returning to Wales, and stored the papers in his family home. Why did he wait so long to reveal them? In a note attached to the documents when he finally donated them to Oxford's Bottlebone collection in 1932, he wrote, "I was afraid of losing my livelihood, afraid that revealing what I had witnessed would destroy my credibility, afraid that the medical establishment would dismiss these papers as fraud rather than acknowledge what they had done. I am old now. I will be dead soon anyway. Let the truth be known, even if it arrives too late to matter." But the papers did matter. When historians began examining them in the 1960s, they realized what they were looking at: a complete medical encyclopedia dictated by a dying woman who had memorized more than 10,000 formulas. The papers included treatments that Western medicine would not discover for decades. An anti-malarial herbal compound that contained artemisinin, the same compound Chinese scientist Tu Yaoyu would extract and win a Nobel Prize for in 2015, except Lin Mei had been using the complete herbal formula in 1888. A treatment for sepsis using huangqin that modern research has confirmed contains powerful antibacterial compounds. Protocols for treating what we now call autoimmune disorders, using formulas that modulate immune response through mechanisms Western medicine only understood after the development of immunology as a field. The Wexford papers proved something devastating. Lin Mei had not been practicing primitive folk medicine. She had been practicing sophisticated, systematic healthcare that in many ways exceeded what Western medicine could offer at the time. And the British doctors who studied her did not fail to understand this. They understood it perfectly. They simply chose to take her knowledge while destroying the person who possessed it, because allowing her to receive credit would have undermined the entire colonial project's claim that Western civilization was bringing enlightenment to backward peoples. The conspiracy was not a secret meeting in a shadowed room. It was systemic. It was the way colonial medicine functioned by design. Indigenous knowledge was not stolen by lone villains, but by an entire institutional apparatus that defined theft as education, exploitation as modernization, erasure as progress. Dr. Wickham was not an aberration. He was the system working exactly as intended. After Lin Mei's death, the theft continued. Between 1889 and 1920, at least 17 papers were published in British and American medical journals describing newly observed Chinese medical treatments. The treatments were not new. They were formulas that healers like Lin Mei had been using for generations. But by filtering them through Western doctors' observations and removing any attribution to the Chinese practitioners who actually developed them, the medical establishment could claim these discoveries as their own. This was not unique to China. The same pattern occurred in India, in Africa, in South America, anywhere Western medicine encountered sophisticated indigenous medical systems that threatened its monopoly on legitimacy. The economic incentives were massive. Pharmaceutical companies could patent modified versions of traditional herbal formulas without compensating the communities that had preserved that knowledge for centuries. Medical schools could teach new treatment protocols without acknowledging they were teaching indigenous medicine stripped of its cultural context. Doctors could build careers on expertise they had simply copied from traditional practitioners, then dismiss those same practitioners as quacks and charlatans. The system protected itself through a simple mechanism. Credibility was determined by credentials. Credentials were controlled by Western institutions, and Western institutions would never grant credentials to people like Lin Mei. Dr. Edmund Wickham returned to England in 1903, where he accepted a position at St. Thomas' Hospital in London and continued publishing research on infectious disease treatment. His reputation as an expert on tropical medicine and Chinese medical practices earned him a knighthood in 1911. He died in 1934, age 82, respected and honored. His obituary in the Lancet praised his pioneering work in bringing scientific rigor to the study of Oriental medical practices. Lin Mei's name appeared nowhere in the lengthy tribute to his career. But something unexpected happened in the decades after Lin Mei's death. The formulas she had taught to Thomas Wexford, though not published in her lifetime, began circulating through underground networks of traditional Chinese healers who had heard of her reputation. Some had been her patients. Others had consulted her on difficult cases. They preserved what they remembered of her innovations, sharing them in oral traditions that Western medicine could not monitor or suppress. By the 1920s, traditional Chinese medicine practitioners in Shanghai were using modified versions of Lin Mei's combination formulas. She had died, but her knowledge lived on in the hands of people who valued it. The resurrection of her story began accidentally in 1968, when a graduate student at Oxford named Margaret Chen was researching the history of psychiatric institutions in colonial Shanghai. She came across the Wexford Papers, which had been donated to Oxford's collection 36 years earlier but never fully catalogued. Chen read them and immediately recognized what she was looking at. She spent the next 4 years tracking down corroborating evidence: asylum records, medical journal publications by Wickham and his colleagues, correspondence between British doctors in Shanghai, and oral histories from elderly traditional medicine practitioners in Taiwan. Chen's dissertation, published in 1972 as The Politics of Medical Knowledge in Colonial Shanghai, was the first comprehensive documentation of what had been done to Lin Mei. The academic world largely ignored it. Medical history was not considered a prestigious subfield, and challenging the legacy of respected British physicians was not career-enhancing. Chen's work was cited primarily by scholars in post-colonial studies and Asian history, not by medical professionals or historians of science. They wanted you to never find this out, but now you know. Now the power is in your hands. Hit like and show that you are not afraid. Comment: medical colonialism is still happening if you see the pattern, because this is not just history. This is how pharmaceutical companies still operate in the Amazon, in India, in Papua New Guinea, taking traditional knowledge, patenting it, erasing the people who discovered it. The breakthrough came in 2015, when Chinese scientist Tu Yaoyu won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for her discovery of artemisinin as a malaria treatment. During her acceptance speech, Tu Yaoyu credited traditional Chinese medical texts as the source of her research direction. This sparked international interest in the sophisticated medical knowledge contained in traditional Chinese medicine. Journalists investigating the history of Chinese medical knowledge came across Margaret Chen's dissertation. They started asking uncomfortable questions. How much of what Western medicine claims to have discovered was actually appropriated from traditional practices without credit? How many indigenous practitioners were erased from history? How many were not just ignored but actively suppressed? How many Lin Meis were there, whose names we will never know because the records were destroyed or sealed? In 2018, a group of medical anthropologists and historians of science published a comprehensive study that examined patterns of knowledge appropriation in colonial medicine. They identified more than 300 documented cases similar to Lin Mei's across Asia, Africa, and South America between 1850 and 1950. Indigenous healers providing information to Western doctors, that information being published without attribution, and in many cases, the indigenous healers subsequently facing persecution, imprisonment, or professional destruction. The pattern was not coincidental. It was systematic policy. The economic dimension is particularly stark. Modern pharmaceutical companies have earned billions from drugs derived from traditional plant-based medicines: artemisinin for malaria, vincristine for cancer, ephedrine for asthma, to name just a few. The indigenous communities that discovered and refined these treatments over centuries received nothing. No royalties, no recognition, no compensation. Under international intellectual property law, you cannot patent traditional knowledge, but you can patent a modified version of it. This creates a perverse incentive. Pharmaceutical companies seek out traditional medicines, make minor molecular modifications, patent the result, and claim it as a novel discovery. The knowledge holders who did the original work are explicitly excluded from any benefits. This is Lin Mei's story scaled to a global system. Her formulas were too valuable to ignore, but their source was too inconvenient to acknowledge. The same calculus plays out today in bioprospecting research, where pharmaceutical researchers collect traditional medicinal plants from indigenous communities, test them for active compounds, and patent the results. Technically legal, functionally theft. There is a question that haunts anyone who studies Lin Mei's story. What was lost? She memorized more than 10,000 formulas, but Thomas Wexford only documented a fraction of what she knew in those final weeks. The rest died with her. Treatments for diseases we still struggle to cure. Diagnostic techniques that might offer insights modern medicine has missed. Combinations of therapies that bridge traditional and contemporary approaches in ways we have not explored. We will never know what could have been learned if she had lived, if she had been given resources and recognition, if she had been able to teach students and publish her findings and continue developing her methods. The medical establishment that destroyed her claimed it was protecting patients from dangerous superstition, but the record is clear about who was actually putting patients at risk. Wickham's published mortality rates for cholera treatment before using Lin Mei's formula, 58%. After implementing her formula, 21%. His tuberculosis patients before exposure to her methods, average survival 37 months from diagnosis. After, 61 months. These are not marginal improvements. These are the differences between life and death. And he achieved them by exploiting knowledge from a woman he then had imprisoned as insane. The cognitive dissonance required to do this, to recognize someone's expertise enough to steal it while simultaneously declaring them incompetent, reveals something essential about how systems of oppression function. They do not reject the humanity and capabilities of oppressed people because they genuinely believe those people are inferior. They reject them because acknowledging equality would require surrendering power. It is more convenient to destroy Lin Mei and take her formulas than to accept her as a colleague and share credit. Lin Mei's story forces a reckoning with what we mean by medical progress. Progress toward what? Toward better patient outcomes, or toward maintaining institutional gatekeeping, toward expanding human knowledge, or toward concentrating credit and compensation among already powerful groups. The Western medical establishment tells a story about itself as the vanguard of scientific advancement, bringing rationality and effectiveness to a world previously mired in superstition. But that story erases people like Lin Mei who were practicing evidence-based medicine, observing outcomes, refining treatments, sharing knowledge, while being dismissed as primitive. In 2021, on what would have been Lin Mei's 155th birthday, a group of Chinese medical students erected a small monument in the village where she was born. It is a simple stone marker with her name, her dates, and a single line. Her knowledge saved thousands. Her name was stolen. The monument was funded through private donations after the local government declined to officially commemorate her, citing insufficient historical documentation. The irony is crushing. The absence of documentation is itself evidence of the erasure. But her story has become a rallying point. Medical students across Asia studying traditional medicine cite Lin Mei as a symbol of knowledge that survives despite attempts to suppress it. Activists advocating for indigenous intellectual property rights use her case as an example of the stakes involved. Historians of medicine use her story to teach about the politics of scientific credit and the ways that institutional power determines whose knowledge counts as legitimate. Today, you didn't just watch a video. You kept a suppressed truth alive. Lin Mei memorized 10,000 ways to heal, and they buried her in an asylum so no one would have to acknowledge that a blind Chinese peasant woman knew more than Cambridge doctors. They published her formulas under their own names. They built careers on her knowledge. They called her insane and left her to die of a disease she knew how to treat. If you want more people to know this, share it everywhere. Like it if you believe this was necessary to document. Write in the comments, traditional knowledge is not free resource, if you understand that this pattern continues today. Subscribe, because in the next video I am exposing the pharmaceutical company that patented a cancer treatment from the Amazon rainforest and the indigenous healer they sued for using her own traditional formula. The pattern did not end in 1889. It just got better lawyers. I cannot do this alone. I need you. Tell me, will you stay silent or will you fight?